Last year, I made a video talking about the time a couple of 4chan users came together to show up some limp-wristed Canadians. And while I declared 4chan to be the victor in the end, there was still one page left unturned in this story, one I that was left undotted, and one T that was left uncrossed. And that was a game I briefly mentioned called I Wani Hug That Gator. Wani is a visual novel developed by Caveman, the same developers that gave us Snoot Game. I'm sure if you clicked on this video, you're already aware what Snoot Game is, but just in case you aren't, here's an extremely brief summary. A Canadian game studio announces a dinosaur visual novel called Goodbye Volcano High. 4chan notices and decides to make a parody visual novel using the same characters. The parody is completed before the real thing and gains a decently sized following. Wani is intended to be a spiritual successor to Snoot Game. Now, given the fact that Snoot Game uses copyrighted characters, they can't exactly sell the game on Steam. So instead, they've opted to create their own colorful cast of dinos and drop them in a school far, far away from Volcano High. And, as the name implies, there's a gator that we're on a mission to hug. Olivia was originally conceived as a crudely drawn paraplegic alligator. Most people wouldn't think much of this design and would laugh it off as some goofy shitposting. However, Caveman are not most people. Instead of laughing it off, Caveman made Olivia's disability into a core component of Wani's story, and they handled it beautifully. If I had a nickel for every time 4chan users made a visual novel that respectfully handled disabled characters, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Alas, that about sums up the history of Wani. It might not be as riveting as Snoot Game's history, but my god if that doesn't stop it from being an absolutely amazing experience. I love Wani. And I just want to say that at the top of this review, if you're even a smidge interested in this game, just click off the video, go buy the game, go enjoy it blind, and go experience one of the best visual novels ever made. You won't regret it, I swear to you that. For those of you who don't feel like playing the game though, and just want a video to watch over lunch, fret not. I'm going to try and keep this video mostly spoiler free. Alright, enough dilly-dallying. Let's get to the review. Firstly, we need to talk about the animated cutscenes in this game. While they are few and far between, they are amazing. I made a tweet about it while I was playing about how they really did not need to go as hard as they did on these cutscenes. The animation, the music, the art, it's all perfect. It's clear they wanted to justify this game's $15 price tag, and justify it, they most certainly did. Actually, on the topic of price tag, let's talk about playtime. I was completely engrossed in this game from start to finish. I was taking in every single word I was reading as fast as I realistically could, and my first playthrough of this game still clocked in at about 20 hours. If you're going for all 4 endings, expect an additional 12 hours on top of that, even when skipping old dialogue. Even if you try to argue that every dollar should equate to an hour of playtime, Wani is still an amazing value for its asking price. When you compare that to the pitiful 5.5 hours that Goodbye Volcano High offers, it makes you wonder how that game ever got away with charging $30. Now, I don't want the entirety of my review to be me beating a dead horse and shitting on Goodbye Volcano High, but I simply need to get the point across that game developers should be rewarded for their end product, not just the time and effort they put into the project. Apparently, Goodbye Volcano High fans don't believe that though. There was a good amount of people in the comments of the original video telling me off, saying I was far too critical of Goodbye Volcano High, and at one point someone even DM'd me on Twitter calling me transphobic. And you know what I say to that?
If it's not fun, why bother?
I don't care that Goodbye Volcano High took 4 years to develop. I don't care that it has LGBTQ representation, and I definitely don't care that Goodbye Volcano High is pretty sometimes. A video game should be fun at the end of the day, and there's absolutely nothing fun about watching a story that you can't interact with. Sure, it might be entertaining, but it's a fucking horrible video game. Goodbye Volcano High is a terrible game that deserved its comeuppance. And don't say that I only believe that because I'm something phobic. You want an amazing visual novel packed with LGBT representation? Try Valhalla. Oh, lesbians don't count? Okay then, how about Guilty Gear? You've got a trans representative and a non-binary representative there, and both of them kick ass. Snoot Game wouldn't have the staying power it did if it was just some guys in 4chan owning the libs. It has the staying power it does because they made a good, memorable game, and that's all I care about at the end of the day, not this culture war bullshit. Now, one could argue that everything I just said is completely irrelevant to reviewing Wani, but it's actually all relevant. Olivia's character arc is all about her being sick of the brownie points she's granted because of her condition. She simply wants to be viewed as an equal to everyone else. For example, early into the game, it's revealed that she harbors a lot of hatred towards a painting she made. Said painting won the school's art competition, and her imposter syndrome led her to believe that she only won because people felt pity for her, and not because they actually admired the quality of her art. While this might seem like an allusion to what I just talked about with Goodbye Volcano High, I think it's more likely that this conflict is just supposed to help the player make decisions. And boy, are you most certainly going to need that help. Plenty of my fellow Wani enjoyers got bad endings their first time through, and admittedly, I did too. I didn't get a bad ending because I decided to baby Olivia though. Instead, I got a bad ending because I chose to neglect the game's protagonist, Inko. Much like Snoot Game, Wani carries a theme of self-actualization. Though Inko doesn't have an obvious character conflict at first, it becomes apparent throughout the game that he lacks his own opinions. He admits early on that he's never really had any close relationships, and he's far too agreeable with those with malicious intent. And worst of all, he listens to video essays instead of forming his own opinion. So yeah, as the player, your goal is to turn Inko into a real human being who thinks and acts on his own, and stop him from becoming someone who seeks approval from the most amount of people possible. Trust me man, you do not want to see Inko at his worst. I've never been more uncomfortable than playing through this game's worst ending. Honestly, despite the fact that 90% of the game's credits consist of anonymous users, you can't really tell that this is a 4chan creation, and that makes sense for two reasons. The first being that this game comes from the perspective of a more well-adjusted individual. Though Inko's a bit of a loser, he only really browses surface-level internet stuff. He doesn't spend his mornings insulting 4chan moderators before school. Secondly, the writers between Snoot Game and Wani are different. Or, at least, I'm led to believe. I don't know, they were all anonymous in the credits for both games, so for all I know, they just ended up adopting a different descriptor between games. Either way though, you don't need to understand 4chan culture to like this game. And I think that's for the better. Now, up to this point, I've spoken almost entirely on the positives of Wani, but I did nitpick Goodbye Volcano High quite a bit in the original video. I messed with the audio settings for at least 10 minutes because I was just in absolute disbelief that they would sell me a $30 game that didn't even have menu music. So I think it's only fair that I nitpick Wani a bit too. First of all, the stock image background. I talked about how these types of backgrounds annoyed me in Snoot Game, and I've been informed that these types of backgrounds are not uncommon in older visual novels. However, that doesn't mean that they look good. What I will say is that they did seem to pick some more photogenic images to use as backgrounds this time around, and they've done an even better job at mixing the hand-drawn characters with the real-life images, but, like, couldn't you guys have just drawn all the backgrounds? I know, game development takes time, and Caveman On is a much smaller team than most games, but given the effort of everything else in the game, I don't know, it just feels like they were so close. They were right there to making a game with amazing art from top to bottom, but they tripped right before they reached the finish line. Oh well, I don't think it detracts from the quality of the game at all, mind you, but it is something worth mentioning. Another criticism I saw of Wani is that the side characters don't feel as interesting as the main duo, and honestly, I'm not too sure I agree with that. There's a character so crucial to the plot of Wani that one might argue that Wani revolves around 3 characters, and if you played the game, you know exactly who I'm talking about. That character is amazingly written, and might just be my favorite in the game, so yeah, I don't know why people are saying that. I guess I could see their perspective when it comes to the amount of important characters. In Snoot Game, pretty much every character served a purpose, even the goddamn principal is crucial to the story. Yet in Wani, your friends are kinda just there to be your friends. It's a different story with different priorities though, and given how well written it is, I think I can give them a pass for not spending as much time with the rest of the characters compared to the main 3. Lastly, the game has a pretty slow start. It had me worrying a bit when I first played it because it doesn't really show its hand or make its themes clear early on, instead opting for a fairly long introductory chapter. And I'm going to guess that this is because they wanted to have a free demo for the game that doesn't spoil anything. The game does have significant payoff by the end though, so I can forget the fairly uneventful early game. With all these nitpicks in mind, I'd still give Wani a 10 out of 10 rating. It isn't perfect, but it's practically perfect. The game is enjoyable from beginning to end, functions from top to bottom, and is an experience I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. It is undoubtedly better than Snoot Game, and I'm thankful to say that. Snoot Game was a great experience, but this was legendary. And my only complaint is that I'm never going to get to experience this game for the first time ever again. So what I'm saying is, Caveman on 1. Again. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing. And if you hated the video, explain why in the comment section below. Either way, I'm gonna go hug that gator. Peace.